I was at Brunswick Secondary College. I started teaching there in 1979, I think it was. I was 78. And took some time off to have my first child in 1980. And when I went back in 1981, middle of 81, a friend of mine was doing careers at Brunswick, and she was just amazing. Her name was Jane Stewart. But she was leaving. I think she was going to go working at to go and work at RMIT. So she said to me, "Look, would you be interested in doing careers? I think this would really suit you." At that time, I was actually thinking of having my second child, and I said, "Look, timing's not quite right." But I had this other really terrific friend who was working there, Hilary May Black, and Hilary became the careers practitioner there, and she was fabulous, actually fabulous. Brunswick is really lucky they had Jane, and then they had Hilary. Jane had set up a group with other careers practitioners in amongst the Brunswick schools. And at that time, it was a very much unionized set of schools there. And this group called Brunswick Secondary Schools Careers Group was just amazing. So when I came back from family leave, I was asked if I'd like to do careers, and I jumped at the opportunity and never looked back. It was one of the best career moves I'd made. I found it the most rewarding position to be in the school. Brunswick at that time was an interesting school. We had a lot of migrant students, refugee students. Every time a new wave of refugees arrived, a lot of them would end up at Brunswick. So that was challenging, but also very rewarding, and really prompted me to sort of look at specific needs of students from refugee backgrounds with disrupted schooling and trauma that they'd been through and so on. So I was very lucky to have colleagues, people like Vivian Tellefson, for example, who is now working in the region, who really supported that sort of work. I started working in careers from a departmental perspective. Margaret Bryant rang me one day and asked if I would like to join a steering committee looking at work experience and workplace learning. And I said, yeah, no problem. So she contacted my principal, so I was allowed to sort of go to these meetings at the department, which is like the hell of portals that you walk through after coming from a school like Brunswick Secondary. But that was really interesting to sort of have another perspective on careers, not just the coalface, but at the policy-making perspective. I found really, really useful. And then I got involved with the CAV. I started off as a committee member at the CAV, and then had my third child and started work as an executive officer. So I used to actually take my son, when he was a baby, to the VCTA, because the CAV at that time was based at the Victorian Commercial Teachers Association in Collingwood. We had the top floor, and they were the ground floor. And they were great. Everyone was so welcoming, including the VCTA staff. They still ask me how Debbie's going, all these years later when I see them. And in those days, of course, we had faxes. So I can remember sort of holding him, feeding him, and faxing. But it was just wonderful. The committee at that stage was just amazing. And I met the most amazing people like Margaret Bride, Betty Levy, John Kidman. Jeff Tellefson was the treasurer of Careers Association for a long time. And he was amazing the way he sort of steered our finances. We had great extension education officers. Heather Sherd, who was deputy principal at Springvale, was seconded to be, that was in the late 80s. And then Jenny Quick from Ballarat replaced her as the extension education officer. And I worked right through with the CAV as an executive officer. And then the position came up for the extension education officer, which is Jenny Quick's position. She's going back to school. So I applied for that, and I got that. And my school was very lucky at that stage, just going back to school. They actually gave me time allowance to sort of attend that. So the department also agreed to that. And I was able to do part-time at the school and part-time working at the CAB. And that was some of my best years. I organised conferences. I love organising things. So I was in my forte there, sort of organising conferences. And I loved research. So I was always looking at the latest bit of research that came out and sharing them. We had a fabulous CAV committee at that time. People like Naomi Collett was around, Graham Campbell, John Kidman, David Osborne. Do you remember David Osborne?
Yes.
He was amazing. He worked for VTAC, wasn't it?
That's right, yes.
And such a ally
Yes.
for the careers practitioners. Every careers person loved him. They could just ring him at any time, and he would be so helpful. So we've had such talent at the CAV at the committee level, plus the careers staff in schools, the career practitioners in schools were just incredible, the ones that we met. And you'll see from the photos that I've got, I've been through the photos yesterday. It was just wonderful to sort of those conferences that we had at Deakin, at Bendigo. We always chose universities to have the conferences at, and also made a point of having it in the regional areas. So it meant that the careers practitioners could see what the regional universities were like, so they could actually counsel students. Universities don't just end within the boundaries of Melbourne, you know. Regional universities are actually vibrant campuses as well. So that was some of the best years of my life, actually working as the EO at the CAV, organising the committee meetings. I loved the conferences, all the social events. The other thing I really loved was also bringing in speakers from overseas. So through my research, I got to find out who some of the luminaries were in careers at the cutting point of of careers, research and so on. People like Tony Watts, Professor Tony Watts, who's became a really good friend because he's came to Australia a few times, and he was just absolutely fabulous. Tristram Hooley, who actually studied under Tony, Deidre Hughes, and just were the English speakers. And then from Canada, you know, people like Serena Hopkins and Lynn Bezanson. So these were speakers that I was able to bring when I was the EO of the CAV for conferences as keynote speakers and so on. So really, really vibrant times. And I think the CAV has kept that up, being at the cutting edge of career development, making sure that our career practitioners hear from the professionals in the field and really who stretch their imaginations and show them what's possible, and also that evidence-based approach to career education, which I think is really important, hearing from these top-class researchers throughout the world. So there were some of my highlights.